Today we're gonna have two parts. First part is PyRep, MyRep, AREP, and second part is all about dispatch reliability. And we're gonna spend on dispatch reliability part a little bit more time than we are spending usual on some subsystems. Okay, and we're gonna have, by the way, very interesting discussion related to the dispatch reliability. We're gonna touch a little bit data processing. Anyway, let's start from PyRep, MyRep, AREP. So, and we have here graph, PyRep, MyRep per 1,000 flight hours per month. Two trend lines, one for PyRep, one for MyRep, and alert level that belongs to the PyReps. Why do we have two different trend lines, one for PyRep, one for MyRep? Answer is very simple, because sometimes we can see that airline includes in MyReps non-technical findings. And as we said many times, all this system, all this reliability report, reliability program, it is all about technical issues, technical PRs. And definitely we need to stay focused on the technical findings and technical problems. Now, saying that, can we combine these two items under one trend line? Answer is yes, but what we need to do when we are processing data, when we are processing collected data, we need to delete non-technical findings from MyReps and definitely PyReps. And then we can combine these two items under one trend line. Next subject, PyRep, MyRep monthly summary table. Oh, by the way, AREP here is part of the PyRep, okay? So what we have in this summary table, we have PyReps monthly, MyReps, AREPs, PyReps rate, MyReps rate, AREPs rate, PyRep 3 months, PyRep 12 months, and we can continue this list based on our experience, based on our local aviation authorities' requirements. The next subject, it's very interesting again, it is MSN number against PyRep, MyRep numbers. So what I love about this type of format, right, presenting this MSN against PyRep, MyReps, actually we can see correlation. Let me put it this way. We can see correlation between aircraft age and number of PyReps and MyReps. Sometimes, right, we are assuming that, hey, the older aircraft might have higher number of PyRep, MyReps. Unfortunately, this is not always the case. Or maybe fortunately, this is not always the truth. But it is very interesting. It is very interesting to see correlation between aircraft age and PyRep, MyRep number. Now, let's move to the next slide. And one of the most controversial, arguable, questionable item, which is dispatch reliability, and our subject title is Mission Interruption Ground. We have here again, as we already mentioned, we're going to spend a little bit more time as usual, right? And first part, a subpart, right? It is all about what we want to see in the summary table, in this summary section. And second part, what is hidden behind all these dispatch reliability items, supporting tables. And as I mentioned, we're going to touch a little bit the data processing. Anyway, let's start from dispatch reliability graph here. It's very simple, very self-explanatory. Initial dispatch reliability, this is the aircraft model, right? Dispatch reliability initial more than 15 minutes. We have here dispatch reliability trend line and alert level. Now, before we start our discussion regarding this, related to all this dispatch reliability summary table, we call it mission interruption ground summary table, again, I would like to bring back our Markov's model, because I would like to use it to visualize our discussion about dispatch reliability. And let me remind you that one of the most critical points for our business model, operation model, maintenance model, right, we identified this point, which is dispatch point. And as we said, we would like to know how reliable is this point, dispatch reliability, or how unreliable is this point. Let's start from dispatch reliability. How reliable is this point? Dispatch reliability group. What items we have? We have initial dispatch reliability, more than 15 minutes. Yellow or red belongs here to the alert level. We already discussed it. Not going now to repeat all this alert level. Not going to discuss what does it mean yellow, what does it mean red for our alert levels. Initial dispatch reliability 3 months, more than 15 minutes, and total dispatch reliability. Now, before we move to the next group, let me again remind you that we have primary contributors. Number one, contributors, I mean here in this dispatch point. Number one, delay. Number two, cancellation. Number three, no delay, no cancellations. For this dispatch reliability point, now let's focus number one, number two, and a little bit later, we're going to discuss about number three contributor. So, number one, delay. Here is the delay group. Initial delay, more than 15 minutes. Total delay, delay rate. Second, cancellation. Second contributor, cancellation. Initial cancellation. Total cancellation, initial cancellation rate. And to cover this loop, right, as we said, we're going to start from dispatch reliability, move to the contributor number one, delay, contributor number two, cancellation, and now how we want to see how unreliable is this system. This is dispatch interruption group. Okay, what items we have here? We have dispatch interruption rate and schedule interruption rate. Okay, now before we move to the contributor number three, I would like to bring very small example. Suppose 4 or 5 hours before takeoff, let's say MSN 01, aircraft 01, 4 or 5 hours or 3 hours, doesn't matter, we found out that we have some technical issues. So 01 is AOG, we have out of service. Operation department, we have the spare aircraft, right? And operation department decides to use substitute aircraft, right? 02. So we have spare aircraft. What does it mean from our dispatch reliability or unreliability perspective? It means that if we have enough time before scheduled takeoff, as we said, 4 or 5 hours before takeoff, we found out, and this is spare aircraft, and then this aircraft was not scheduled for any different flights. So it means that we have enough time to prepare 02 or to send 02 instead of 01 to do this scheduled flight, 01 scheduled flight. So what does it mean? It means that we have enough time, we prepare it, and we have no delay, no cancellation. Let me give you what does it mean here. What does it mean from dispatch reliability perspective, this no delay, no cancellation? I'm going to use ideal case. It means that, let's say, last month we had 100% dispatch reliability. The same time, so we have 100% dispatch reliability, but same time, 01 is unavailable. My question is now, suppose, again, let me put it this way. Suppose we had, again, last month, 100 scheduled flights. Just example. 15 times we used substitute aircraft. My question is, do we want to see this information in our summary table, in our summary section? I think the answer is yes. That's exactly what I'm trying here. So what type of contributors or reliability characteristics trying here to bring to this summary table. It can be, again, depends on our experience. We can use dispatch availability, unavailability, or just AOG numbers, auto service numbers, or we can use just number of substitute aircraft that we used last month. Okay. Now let's move to the next slide. And one small thing I would like to add here, right? We can ask questions, right? While we are building, because before we move to the next slide, I think it is a very important point also, right? Before we move, why we are building this type of complexity, right? Because one side, we have a lot of information, right? We have maybe for if you just look into all these groups, right, and items, you say, hey, do you know what? Is it too much, or it is not too much information? And the reason why I'm doing here, right? Because let's say you just started operation, right? 6 months ago, 2 months ago, 3 months ago, you don't have enough experience. And as we already identified this, right? This point is one of the critical points for our business model, for our business. And then we're trying to understand from reliability perspective all these balance points, from reliability characteristics perspective. So what we need to measure here, and I would highly recommend, until we don't have enough experience, enough data, takes 2-3 years, right? At least 2-3 years, first 2-3 years, to use this type of approach, right? To include this type of information in your reliability section, summary section at least, right? Because we need to have clear picture what's happening with one of the most critical point, which is dispatch point here. 2-3 years later, when we have enough information, when we have enough experience, enough data, we can then combine it and remove some groups, delete some groups, combine some groups, remove some items, delete some items, combine some items. It depends on our experience, depends on our models, and now, by the way, it depends on also our local aviation authorities' requirements. Okay, now let's move to the next slide. And